This is the Jeff Oregon Show.
All right, I'm happy to have back on the program and get an update what's going on here with Curtis Moore, who serves as the Senior Vice President of Marketing Corporate Development at Energy Fuels. Curtis, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on again, Jeff.
Remind us, because we got to there's a mine that's north of Williams, south of Tucson area, but give us a quick rundown for people who, may not remember what you guys do at Energy Fuels.
Yeah, no, happy to. So Energy Fuels, we're a producer of uranium and rare earth elements and other critical minerals. We're based in Denver, Colorado, but what's of interest to you and your listeners is our mine, like you said, which is between Williams and Tucson. It's a uranium mine. It's a very, very high grade uranium mine that we have been looking to put into production for the last, really the last few decades, quite frankly. Yeah. But with uranium prices being on the rise, and all the tensions between the United States and Russia on Russian uranium imports and that sort of thing, this mine has become extremely important to the region and to the country in general.
You said it's high grade uranium. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? I don't know. I know very little about a lot of things. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so high grade. What that means, that refers to the richness of the ore. So ore. You don't just go dig up nuggets of uranium out of the ground. The uranium metal is bound up in certain minerals, and so when we're talking about grade, that refers to the percentage of uranium in the rock that you're digging up. So at the Pinion Plain mine, the grade is about 1% uranium. So just for context, that means for every ton of rock that we remove from that mine, about 20 pounds of that will be uranium that we can recover and sell to domestic nuclear power plants and produce nuclear power.
20 pounds per ton, if my abacus is right, 20 pounds per 2,000 pounds.
Yes.
So you have 2,000 pounds of rock and dirt and what?
Yep. Just rock,
and then 20.
Rock and dirt. Yep.
Okay, because the controversy has been, if we can call it that, I guess, is, you got to transport this because obviously there's not a power plant right there or refining capabilities or anything like that. You're not, well, let me ask you that, Curtis. You're not refining in northern Arizona. You have to get it somewhere.
No. Literally, all we're doing is we're digging this uranium-bearing rock out of the ground and transporting it to our mill in Utah. Okay. And everything that our company does deals with what's called natural uranium, and that's not a marketing term, kind of like a natural gas or something like that. It's actually a legal and a scientific term when you're talking about natural uranium. That is uranium as it occurs in nature. It's not very radioactive. I mean, look, you have to handle it carefully, of course, because it's a heavy metal. You don't want to ingest it. You don't want to breathe it in, that sort of thing. But it's not highly radioactive. It only becomes highly radioactive when you enrich it. When you enrich uranium, it's no longer, quote, natural uranium or UNAT or whatever the term may be. And that's where, if you enrich it, it creates a self-sustaining nuclear reaction. You can, again, create heat, boil water, spin a turbine, put energy on the grid. That's how it works.
So when you take the uranium out, you have to transport it, and there's approximately 20 pounds per ton. What's a dump truck?
It's about 20 tons.
Okay. So there's potentially, help me out here, 400 pounds or so of uranium mixed. It's not buried in, it is buried in there, but it's mixed in. There's a little bit here and a little bit there throughout the truck. Okay.
Yeah. It's just sort of, bound up in the minerals. Yep.
Okay. So the controversy that has erupted is the transportation, because it has to transport from, and you had to go through however many decades or years of approval process here, and you got the approval process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's an existing EIS. There's an existing plan of operations. Okay. There's existing mining permits, groundwater permits, air permits, EPA approvals, the whole shoot match.
Okay. So then you have to drive it. And I know you've given me the route in the past, Curtis, but it goes through Flagstaff. Does it go through Williams, Flagstaff, I-40, and then it has to go north on 89. But then you got to hang a right and you go through, you go through Tuba City and other Navajo. That's where the controversy erupted here a couple months ago.
Yeah, a few months ago. It had to do with ore transport. Now I'll tell you, this mine has been controversial since day one.
So this was just one more thing.
It's become a bit of bit of a symbol of anti-nuclear activism,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But,
Okay.
um,
Which is, I don't quite understand that because, I mean, obviously we had the huge election and the country is changing direction in a massive way. And I think that industries like yours, quite frankly, well, any American energy industry, I think is going to do quite well. I don't give you investment advice, but I'm not personally buying windmills right now. And and even solar, and those can have a place in the whole energy pie. Don't get, and I think you agree with that. But I think that we're coming on a massive change here. But you still have, there's still 6 weeks or so left of the current regime, current administration that, I don't know, is it fair to say has not been friendly when it comes to industries like yours and petroleum?
I would agree. No, it has not been. It has not been friendly.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Curtis, but yeah.
No, you're right. No, you're right. I mean, some of the things that we've had to deal with on this this mine, on our mill in Utah.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes, unfortunately, it's just unscientific nonsense. And it's pretty regrettable because, again, you talk about, this need for electricity. I mean, our society is becoming much more energy intensive.
Yeah.
We need every source of energy we can get, whether it's nuclear, whether it's wind, solar, petroleum, whatever it is. I mean, we need this electricity. That's why, even companies like Amazon and Google and other technology, Microsoft, other technology companies, they are investing in nuclear because they know they're going to need a whole lot of energy for their, data centers and AI and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the server farms and all that. Yeah.
And there is just, I mean, like it or not, there is just a lot of energy in uranium. It's very, very energy dense. You get a whole lot of energy out of a very, very small amount of material. And so, like for instance, our mine in Arizona there, it'll probably produce 4 or 5 million pounds of uranium off of about a 15-acre site. That's it. It's 15 acres. I mean, that's almost nothing when it comes to mining. It's just a small underground mine. It's probably not going to expand, beyond that footprint. Or anything like that, but that would be enough to power the state of Arizona for like one or 2 years. I mean, off of that little tiny site, there's just
that's what I don't get, Curtis, is because it's like they want the clean green energy, and I'd argue that nuclear. I mean, you have the waste issue, which I hope we can continue to refine and resolve. I don't know if they still have that place in Nevada, or has that been mothballed?
Yeah, that's kind of dead for now. I will tell you, Jeff, that the waste issue I think is kind of a red herring.
Okay, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah, waste is not an issue when it comes to nuclear energy. I mean, name me one energy source where where your all of your waste is confined, all of your externalities are confined into this concrete and steel cask, and that's where used fuel goes in the United States. They put it, it's in dry cask storage, is what they call it, and so. I've stood right next to these things, and they don't put off a whole bunch of radiation or anything like that. It's these concrete and steel containers where the used fuel just it sits there, and it cools off. It loses its energy. It loses its radioactivity over time. I heard somebody say there's a stat that if you took all of the high level nuclear waste ever produced in U.S. history in the last whatever it is 60 years of commercial nuclear energy production in this country, it would fill a football field about 30 feet high. So, wow. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not like we're drowning in this stuff. Well, yes, ideally we'll have a long-term storage solution, but right now those casks are just on site at the nuclear power plants. You can actually look at a Google Maps on like Palo Verde in Arizona, west of Phoenix, and you can see it's just these big cylinders kind of sitting out in a parking lot.
I remember talking. I toured Palo Verde a few years back, and it was still it was really cool to see that. And they talked about the storage on site, but really, unless you're willing to live in a cave, there is an impact on everything. I think we have to be real about that. Because I used to have people complain to me about environmental degradation as they're reading their speech from their iPad. And I'm like, that came from China, and I can go into, what their wages are over there and their environmental impact. There is an impact, but what are we looking at here when we're talking about something that, like you said, is confined to small areas? And if you want to go green, whatever that may be to you, nuclear has to play a big part. I'm an advocate of this because it has to, and it has to come. Here's what I don't get, Curtis. It has to come from somewhere, but not in my backyard.
That is the problem we run into all the time where, people will say, well, look, I support nuclear. and I know it has to run on uranium, but you can't mine it here, or you can't mine it there. You can't do this here. You can't do. It's like, well, where are you going to do it? You have to do it somewhere. And like when it comes to uranium, we didn't put it there.
Yeah.
I mean, like it or not, I mean, honestly, I wish it was somewhere else, just from kind of obvious reasons. But it's just the best uranium deposits in the United States are in northern Arizona. It's these little tiny, very high grade, very rich deposits that can be mined extremely responsibly with no real, let's say, minimal harm to the environment. Look, mining by its very nature is destructive. You're blasting rock out of the ground, right?
Yeah.
There's no getting around that. But
I'd like to see that, by the way, someday. But go ahead.
Yeah, look at you.
You had me at blowing stuff up, but go ahead. Sorry, Curtis.
Well, I don't know if we'll do blasting under there.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's just it has to come from somewhere, and this is probably the most studied mine. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say this is the most studied, heavily regulated mine in American history. I mean, this thing has been going for decades. It has been studied to death. I mean, the risks are very well known, and the risks are minimal. And risk is kind of a two. The way I look at it is kind of a two factors of risk. One is the chance of something happening, and the other is, okay, if that thing happens, what's the
outcome?
Negative?
Yeah.
What's the outcome, right? And so, what a lot of people are concerned about with this mine is groundwater contamination. Which has been, again, heavily studied. State of Arizona put this individual groundwater protection permit in place about 2 years ago, which is probably one of the most protective permits anywhere in the United States. And so the chances of groundwater contamination are nil. And even if somehow, some way, everything were to fail and a little groundwater were to seep out the side into these perched aquifers, which are these isolated aquifers that aren't going to hurt any, nobody's drinking out of it or anything. We know it because we have monitor wells all over there. And so you can just pump the monitor wells and keep it confined to the area. I mean, some of this, contention that we're going to like pollute Havasu Creek 40 miles away. I mean, it's nonsense. But there are people out there, anti-nuclear activists, Sierra Club types that are spreading that kind of fear and misinformation. And it's, kind of distressing for me.
Well, the transport issue was the big issue, and you started transporting this a couple months back, and we spoke at that point, Curtis. Mm-hmm. Are you still because I think the governor got involved of Arizona, and everybody went wild because they're like, oh, they're transporting this like it was a big surprise because this was going on for a long time. Yes. Are you transporting, or did you halt? What's going on there? Okay, that was shortly after we spoke.
Yeah, exactly. We voluntarily decided to pause transport while we had some discussions with the Navajo Nation. And so what happened there was that even though we have all of our permits, all the rights, all of the legal ability to transport ore on federal highways and interstates and that sort of thing. And again, this is heavily regulated by federal law, U.S. Department of Transportation regulations. And keeping in mind that uranium ore is what's called low specific activity material, which is about the lowest level of radioactive materials hauled on roads routinely. I mean, I think I read somewhere that there's something like 3 million loads of radioactive materials that are hauled on U.S. highways every year. Okay, so this is not an unusual thing, and this is about the lowest level radioactive materials you can talk about. But regardless, it upset. Even though the Navajo were they were notified about a lot of this stuff over the past many years, they were surprised by this. And so we, again, voluntarily decided to stop transport while we could have some discussions. And I have to say, those discussions have gone really, really well. I think that, honestly, there's been a certain degree of trust that has been built, not just them with us, but also us with them. I think we came to realize that they really were, acting in good faith there. And they did have some concerns. They have some, a lot of, factors that they have to consider. They have a long history of uranium mining from kind of the old, Cold War era, and a lot of suspicion about it. And I'd be suspicious about it if I were them as well. So even though we've been hauling uranium ore across the Navajo Nation for the last 20 years with no spills, no incidents, no nothing, I think they wanted to have a sit down and see, and learn more about it, and also see if there was anything more we could do to really kind of put their own people's mind at rest. And I think we're getting pretty close. And I think it could be a really nice outcome, not just for us, but also for them. I don't know, maybe I'm a,
optimistic,
being naive here or something,
yeah.
but I really think this could be the beginning of a great partnership.
Do you expect something, any kind of notification soon, or what? I mean, is there anything in the pipeline, or where you
Yeah,
at?
I mean, we've had, I think, probably 7 or 8 meetings, in-person meetings with them. They've taken tours of our facilities. They've been very cordial, very productive. Yeah, I don't want to speculate on timing, but
Yeah.
I think we're going to get to a really good place with the tribe.
Okay. As far as the uranium that you guys mine, I'm just curious because there's been a lot of, obviously this would be an understatement, Curtis, tension with Russia. Quite frankly, we've been on, World War III watch here for a couple weeks, sadly. So are you concerned that there's going to be kind of like what was that movie? I just watched that movie with Jane Fonda, the China Syndrome. Is that the one? Was that from the late 70s or something? And I saw it on Netflix or something. I was like, hey, I never saw this. And it's a typical 70s movie. But after that, there was a very negative, and then 3 Mile Island happened, right? So there's this very negative backlash towards nuclear. Now you've got the threat of nuclear war and what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, a real threat, I might add. This is not just, conspiracy theory stuff. Do you worry that gives the whole industry, it just ties it all together, that, how we make nuclear power is the same stuff as how we, you're going to just also make a bomb, in the back room too? I mean, do you worry about a blowback, I guess, from global affairs?
I don't, honestly, that's not something I really thought about.
That's what we try to do here, Curtis.
Yeah, right. Like I said, you can use uranium for bombs. Our uranium is used for nuclear power plants.
So there's no difference. There's it doesn't go down this conveyor belt for that, go down. It's a certain kind of uranium then.
Well, it's not a certain kind of uranium. When you're talking about nuclear energy versus bombs, you're talking about the level of enrichment.
Okay.
So like I said, well, I guess I can do a little, uranium 101 and enrichment 101 here.
Please.
In nature, uranium, and what I call, again, back to this natural uranium that I'm talking about, it's roughly 99.3% U-238 and 0.7% U-235. So if you can remember back to your high school chemistry or physics days, that's kind of the 2 main isotopes of uranium. Okay, and it's a stable, state for uranium. I mean, it has a half-life of billions of years. And so, again, if you had this, I have a coffee cup here. If you had, this much uranium in several billion years, half of that will have decayed into something else. So that's why natural uranium is not very radioactive. However, if you want to create a self-sustaining nuclear reaction for a nuclear power plant, you increase the U-235 from 0.7% to 3 to 20%. Okay. 3 to 5% for a nuclear reactor like Palo Verde. Some of the new designs like SMRs and advanced reactors, they enrich right up to about 20% U-235. And that creates, again, a self-sustaining nuclear reaction, creates heat. You boil water, essentially, spin a turbine, put energy on the grid. If you want it to explode, and that means you want to create a very quick, very destructive, immediate nuclear reaction, you enrich that 235 to like 99% or 95%.
Oh, wow.
Way higher than what's needed in a nuclear power plant. That's why a nuclear power plant can't explode like a bomb. It's just physically impossible. You have to enrich the heck out of that U-235. So that's the big difference. So yes, could our uranium technically be enriched to 99% U-235? Sure, but it's not. Our customers are U.S. commercial nuclear power plants for nuclear energy.
Okay. And there's no, there was a halt to Russia has a lot of uranium as well. That's not coming in. So that big supply was taken off. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah,
talk about that a bit.
We passed a Russian uranium ban.
Okay.
So Congress passed it. President Biden signed it this past spring, which allegedly was going to cut off all uranium imports from Russia. And we're talking about enriched uranium for the most part, is what we're buying from Russia. We get something like a quarter of all of our enriched uranium used in U.S. nuclear power plants from Russia.
So ready to go.
Yeah, okay. It needs to be made in, fabricated into fuel, but it's pretty much ready to go. Okay. It's already been enriched. It's already highly radioactive and that sort of thing. That's what comes in from Russia. So we passed this ban.
How do they ship that here?
It's in ships.
teleported or something? Okay, that's enriched uranium.
That's enriched uranium.
Okay,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
okay, go ahead.
Again, this stuff gets trucked around the United States. I mean,
and on high seas.
Yeah, on the high seas. Yep,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt, Curtis.
Yeah. I mean, that gets to the point about ore transport. I mean, look, uranium ore is nothing compared to that stuff. Okay. But anyway.
But the ban is in place, but you're saying, is it getting in? Is it still coming in?
But the administration's been very generous in giving waivers to the ban.
Okay.
So we passed a ban. Now we're pretty much, we're getting waivers. Now,
it's an interesting world, Curtis. We got rockets going over that are U.S. and British made, and we've got Putin saying you've crossed the red line, and we've got money that we're pumping over to Ukraine, and we got a ban on uranium, but then waivers may come in for uranium for Russia.
Well, it's crazy too, because just in the last week or two, Putin said, well, maybe we're going to stop exporting uranium to the United States, which. Yeah, I'd do that if I were him as well. You're kind of, if you're the U.S. and we're gonna pass a ban, but we're gonna offer waivers because we really need that Russian uranium. Well, if you're Putin, you're kind of like, there's a little kind of like
natural. It's kind of like natural gas to Europe, and all that. Okay, but
so he said that, and then he revoked a permit. But again, now it sounds like Russia is doing kind of incremental permits. It just seems like there's just sort of this incremental moves by either side.
Okay.
I mean, because they're smart, U.S. utilities are voluntarily moving off of Russian uranium.
And that's a big thing I see coming up, Curtis, with the Trump administration is the push to insource. He's talked about tariffs and things like that. We've seen it here in Arizona, although I don't agree with the mechanism they use with the CHIPS Act and all that, where we're giving billions of dollars to foreign companies to beg them to come over here, where there's an advantage of a Taiwanese company not being in Taiwan or possibly geographically diversifying because of the threat of China. It's the same thing in your industry with uranium mines. We have uranium here. We have tons of resources, not just in your field. We've got tons of natural resources and raw materials here. It would behoove us to do it here and not think that by importing it from somewhere else that there's not the issues that you're fighting about over here for the environmental movement. I would like to consider myself an environmentalist. I think you would as well. I don't want you dumping enriched uranium back in the day it was gasoline in the rivers and stuff from the refineries when they were dumping that stuff because it was a byproduct. Nobody wants that. We've come a long way in this country on pollution, but then we've also gone too far with regulations. I know the Trump administration has been looking at, and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the Department of Government Efficiency. Do you see the EPA as a target of the Trump administration? Do you see it panning out differently than it is now, or do you think we're going to be the same way 4 years from now as we are now?
Well, I don't know. I do think that there's some things that should probably be done to the EPA to rein them in a bit. They pulled something on us with our mill about 3 or 4 years ago that was it just flummoxed us, where they basically revoked an approval that they had given us. It was pretty bad, and we're hearing some noise that they're maybe on their way out of the Biden administration, they may be releasing a report on our mine. We don't know what it'll say. I mean, honestly, the EPA, I think they were requested to do it by the tribes. By the Havasupai tribe, just to look at groundwater. But look, the groundwater has been studied over and over again. There is so much knowledge about how groundwater acts and how it's protected and that sort of thing. And again, any contention that this mine is going to impact the Havasupai, which is literally 45 miles downstream. It's about, Supai is 35 to 40 miles as the crow flies. It's just, there's no connection of any kind. And again, I'm not even sure under the worst environmental disasters in world history, has groundwater contamination ever gone 40 miles? I don't know, but that's a long way.
That's a long way. Yeah. Okay.
And especially with all the wells and groundwater monitoring we have to do, there's just no way that'll happen. Yeah. So anyway, we'll see what the report says.
Okay.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, the science is very, very well known.
Well, this is my
nothing
point, though, Curtis. I'm like, we're outsourcing so much of this stuff, rare earth materials. We even make deals with Venezuela to get oil in here because we didn't have, we needed it, even though we're dealing with a bad regime. How many bad regimes in the world and Putin would be a bad regime, quite frankly. How many bad
China
regimes?
as well, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, we've got it here. Wouldn't you rather, and if it's not the EPA, I mean, you also have to deal with the Arizona issues as well.
ADEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, they're great. They're the ones that have really studied this. They're the ones that have really done all the hard work on the ground and made these evaluations that this mine can operate responsibly. So we have no complaints with the state of Arizona. But honestly, get it out as local as possible.
Yeah, I think we live in the past, though, because, could you remember, like I said, back to the oil refineries that were dumping gasoline in the 1800s, in Ohio, or wherever the heck that was, and it was literally catching on fire.
Yeah.
We live in a different world. Could you imagine the viral video of, there's this company dumping gasoline in the river again and nothing happens?
Look, if you go back to,
frustrating.
Say pre-1970s, the 1970s were kind of the turning point for environmental regulation in this country. Before that, there was a lot of bad stuff that happened. But the 1970s is when you had NEPA. Now, look, NEPA has been abused, but I won't go there. But the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, Endangered Species Act, kind of all these seminal environmental laws were put in place. And they probably needed to be put in place because a lot of environmental degradation was happening prior to that time. But I feel like the pendulum has swung so far to the other side where it's just, don't do anything anywhere. I mean, or you have to, quantify, every tiny, tiny little risk. One of the things that I think this EPA report may say, again, I'm completely speculating, is that, there's the risk is very, very small, but we can't rule out the fact that, possibly some groundwater contamination could possibly get somewhere. But honestly, we're talking about risks. Did you evaluate the risk of a meteor strike? What about if Glen Canyon Dam were to fail? What if an airliner were to hit the it's just
there's all kinds of possibilities. Yeah, I did watch the first Superman movie last night though with my kids, the original one from '78, and the Hoover Dam was destroyed by nuclear missiles that Lex Luthor hijacked. So anything is possible, right?
Well, and that's the thing is that you can always just be what if. But if you do that, you'll never get anything done. You wouldn't drive to work in the morning. It's just
if you look at the stats on driving. No, I don't want us to outsource stuff like this, and then people think it's okay because we did it somewhere else. If it's okay to do over there, and you want all the luxuries of modern society, we should do it here, where we know the standards are much better than most countries. Because I'm sure there's some of your competitors around the world that will decide to do business in the mining industry in other countries where you can buy people off, quite frankly, where you can have lax environmental standards. We've all seen the, people mining with mercury for gold and this and that. And, people do it in these areas because it's so laxed, but it ain't good. And I'm not saying every country's like that. I'm just saying that we're still getting this material. We're still doing it. We still need it.
Yeah. And again, I'm not against imports of even critical minerals, like uranium or rare earths or anything like that. But let's import it from our friends. Let's not enrich our enemies.
Yeah.
And so, and on the uranium side as well, I've been talking a lot about Russia, but there's even some evidence that they might be trying to circumvent and sort of, funnel Russian uranium into the United States through China. So, again, I don't know, we got to keep our eye on that sort of thing too. So
rebrand it maybe.
From China. It's these guys are, at best, they're our geopolitical foes. At worst, they're our enemies. So, we should have these capabilities here. And look, we all want to protect the environment as well. And of course, I'm an environmentalist as well. But if people understood, the mining practices, the human rights practices that other companies have, they'd be absolutely horrified. It's not, uranium is, has its issues, but, our company also does rare earth elements. And oh my God, the rare earth supply chains in some places are just horrifying. Yeah. If people knew what was going into their EV, for instance, it'd be,
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's like it's still a car that has all the components, but you changed out the drivetrain. And where is that stuff coming from? Yeah. And I've seen the videos of some of the stuff in Africa and other countries where they're taking advantage of people in a very desperate situation who are just trying to literally put food and feed their kids, but they're getting wages that you couldn't even imagine to provide these goods and services. Yeah,
so, or just wiping out entire ecosystems to get minerals. I mean,
that too.
I mean, there's better ways to do it. We do it right here in the United States.
All right. Curtis, I wish you the best. I do want to get up there and see that mine at some point, and when our schedules all jive and coordinate, if that ever happens. And then let us know if there's any news. And I will be interested to do a follow-up once we get a little more, because I have some experts I bring in the petroleum industry as well, just to see what changes you're noticing even a couple months into the Trump administration. It'll be fascinating to see what happens. Curtis Moore with Energy Fuels. He's the senior vice president, if I could get this all out, of marketing and corporate development. I appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving and happy Merry Christmas coming up, and happy New Year.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for watching this video. Thank you to everyone listening on the podcast as well. Do me a favor right now. Please subscribe. I appreciate everybody that's doing it. Subscribe, and share with your friends. If you've already done that, leave a comment. That helps us out a lot, and we'll see you back here real soon.